And as advertised, we're going to talk about the off-cycle elections coming up this Saturday across Imo, Kogi, and Bayelsa State, as the electorates in those states head to the polls to elect their governors who will run the affairs of their state in the next 4 years. In two states, two incumbents are in the running for re-election, and in Kogi State, there will be a new governor after Yabelo finishes his 8-year term. Now, of course, we have 51 candidates going into these elections across Imo, Kogi, and Bayelsa. Out of the three states, just 3 women are in the running for the governorship seat. And this morning on Daybreak, we take a look at the forthcoming election, what the stakeholders have been up to, those peace accord signings, what it means, and also the political temperature across all those states, and whether or not enough has been done to pacify and also put in place mechanisms that will guarantee a free, fair, credible, and transparent electoral process. We have with us, join us in the studio, Dengiyefa Angalapu, who is a research analyst with the Center for Democracy and Development. And also during the course of the conversation, we'll be talking to our correspondents across Imo and Bayelsa State, just to get feelers, especially with regards to developments in those states. In Bayelsa, we also understand that after the signing of the peace accord, the tensions remain high. And in Imo State, the NLC situation is further aggravating an already fragile political atmosphere in the state. But let's kick off the conversation here with Mr. Angalapu, who we're happy to have join us for the conversation this morning. Good morning to you and welcome to the program.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Good morning.
Right.
It's good to see you.
These states, unfortunately, do not have a positive track record with regards to peaceful, free, fair, and credible elections. Kogi State, Imo State, and Bayelsa State. I mean, they do have their own share of problems. But what do you make of the current atmosphere across these states, and what the INEC as well as the police have been doing to ensure and guarantee a seamless process?
Yeah, so at the Center for Democracy and Development, we have been observing elections in this state. And first off, the reason why they are off cycle is also because of the precarious nature of those states. But it is also what I term as the blessings of off cycle, because we are having, 3 states that are very, very, very difficult to contest elections, being isolated, and so you would mean that institutions have a greater resources to deploy to those particular states, unlike the general elections where we have to disperse our scarce resources across, all the states of the federation. But for us, really, this is an early referendum. So this election is coming, about 5 months after the presidential elections, the general elections. So I mean, 5 months after we now have a president. So for us, it is very strategic. This is the very first election that the president will be supervising, and so we are going to gauge the non-partisanship of the president with this particular elections. It's also one that that by the time we conduct the election, the government will have been 120 days in office. Now, why we say it's an early referendum, it's basically because we have issues of subnational nature and then issues of national nature. Coming to the national nature of the issues, the first issue would be that the government has taken very, very strategic decisions like the removal of fuel subsidy, in terms of looking at the exchange policies against exchange rates and all of that. So this will be one election that that citizens will in those states will use, looking at in terms of how they align with the federal government, or perhaps show their disagreement with the federal government. So it's an important election that tests the capability of the APC. But I will delve into the main issues. For us, it's important. We have 5 key issues, and let's say, in fact, 6 key issues really. We have the 5 I's and then a T that that determines the elections. So one is insecurity. If you look at all of the 3 states in 3 different geopolitical zones, are characterized by insecurity. So you come to Bayelsa State. Bayelsa is one state that has been, historically known for insecurity. We've had, the issue of militancy in that region. Of course, we had the amnesty program in 2019, but militants have transcended to become political gatekeepers in community. So, for example, the APC governorship candidate is a former militant, but sometimes the media is skewed towards that direction. election, but I don't know how many people know that the leader of the House of Assembly in Bayelsa, the Speaker of the House of Assembly in Bayelsa State, is also a former militant. Yeah, and controls a large swarm of boys, in the amnesty program. So you have different militants and all of that. So with the very strong...
Why is the word former not the key word there? Because if he's former, means that he has turned a new leaf.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So if you study the Niger Delta, you get to realize that they've transcended from violent actors, to political gatekeepers in communities. And let's not forget that with the resurgence of militancy in 2016, just when Goodluck Jonathan lost the elections, and then you have the Niger Delta vengeance, it will show you how very easy it is to switch between the former militant back to militancy. So they still control a large swarm of boys, and it's also a state that is being infested by cultism, sea piracy, and all of that. And if you look at the cultic structures of those states, if you look at the very powerful cult structures of those states, they are also ones that still have some of the ex-militants dominating. So I did a writing recently that that looked at that dimension of politics in that state. So you still have situations where in the Nembe, Brass, Southern Niger local government areas, you just necessarily need to talk to militant actors, for you to win elections. So there is now a concept in Bayelsa where we say accredit and go. So while we talk about election technology and the sale of the innovation that election technology has brought, so you see militant actors and political gladiators in communities that they control tell you can accredit and then you can go. So once you accredit and perhaps the number is 120, the only thumbprint to ensure that the number is not above 120 to a preferred candidate, and then the election can be adjudged free and fair.
So people don't actually get to vote in some of those situations.
Yeah. So this is the reality that can possibly happen, because it happened. I mean, from reports I got from some interviews I did in Bayelsa for the pre-election, I saw that it happened during the presidential elections. Now let's move over to Imo. Imo State is one state that is characterized by autonomous agitation, separatist agitations, IPOB, unknown gunmen, and all of that. Let us also not forget that during the civil war that happened between 1967 to 1970, Imo State, Owerri, was declared as the Biafra capital. Right. So it's one state that is very historic in terms of autonomous agitations, and that is already playing out. We have seen unknown gunmen and all of that. But that is all. But the unique thing about the separate agitation is that it is very closely knitted or closely related to political agitation. So it is very easy for you to galvanize, those kind of persons for violence. So we've seen, candidates coming to talk about how they've been attacked, their vehicles have been attacked, and all of that. So you see places like Oru West, Oru East. You see Olu, you see Njaba. These are places that are very, very difficult. Or Kigwe, very difficult to conduct elections. So insecurity is a very, very big issue. Coming to Kogi State. Kogi State is also one that is is known for political violence. Political violence, in fact, I say Kogi State is a microcosm of Nigeria because it has issues of identity politics at the fore, and it is mobilized for political violence. Now, if you look at that state very, very carefully, you will get to realize that Kogi State, one of the very difficult situations in that state is that it has lots of boundaries. So it is bordering about 9 states and the FCT, making it 10 terrains that are bordering it. So it's difficult for you to, close off all of the boundaries during an election. And you necessarily need to cordon out those places to conduct free, fair, credible elections and, reduce security breaches. But that state is also well known for, mobilizing non-state violent actors for violence. And of course, if you followed security reports within the last few years, it's also having different cells of terrorism and SARO, the ISWAP, and all of that have been known to pose serious security threats there. And we know that most of these terrorist groups, they are one of their grievances is against elections and Western civilization. So that's also a threat that we cannot actually take out.
All right, but how central, in the face of all you have mentioned, is the role of the sitting governors in the way the atmosphere has panned out in these 3 states? We have tough talking governors as well as tough talking oppositions. I mean, you saw the case of Bayelsa just shortly after signing the peace accord. You would think that the statements they would issue afterwards would be one of calling for peace and calmness and orderliness from the citizens, but they are still spoiled for war. you know, basically. How does that further aggravate the precarious situations in these 3 states?
Yeah, so that will lead me to my second high, and that is incumbency. So we have, you know, serious powers of incumbency in those states. So if you look at Bayelsa State, you've had accusations of different the use of power for different purposes. In Imo State, it's even more glaring. You've also seen how even the NLC has been brought into the political contestations of that particular place. Of course, whether true or not, we saw that story of how perhaps all hotels were booked and all of that. I mean, we can't really verify that now.
Or even discontinuance.
Of course, yeah, but it goes to show you the power of incumbency. The very clear one was when I watched on national television where the PDP deputy candidate of Imo State was practically saying they paid 10 million naira, you know, to post their billboards. But I mean, the government said no, that was a part payment, and you have to pay about 54 million naira and all of that. And they were saying, oh, since it's practically a way to discourage us to post our billboards, let us go to the communities to preach the gospel of the PDP. I mean, so that practically means that people are not free, you know, to go out to campaign, really. So it's a very, very big problem. So let's look at Kogi State. Kogi State, although it's among the 3 states, it is one that of course the Ayabele is term limited, is not allowed to contest the election again, but it has an anointed candidate, right? And I mean, from same community, Okene there, and he has been working as though he's on the ballot, really. So it is something that we really need to look out for, and we know that, you know, state structures can be appropriated in Nigeria for selfish gains. So also one thing we've actually seen in this election, most predominantly than even the threats caused by non-state violent actors, is the use of security forces and accusation and counter-accusation of use of INEC, commissioners of police, and all of that to deploy violence. So the power of incumbency has become very, very strong in this election.
Okay, let's talk about 2 institutions that are instrumental to the exercise. I mean, INEC is at the center of everything because it is the umpire. It is the one that organizes and conducts the elections. But also, the Nigerian police has responsibility to guarantee security and safety. Give me a sense of what you make of their deployment, because INEC has, again, in its traditional fashion, guaranteed, you know, seamless deployment of materials. I think in Bayelsa State, the chairman of INEC said they're going to deploy 2 days earlier so that they can address some of those logistical challenges that they faced in the 2023 general elections. In Imo State, for instance, 15 commissioners of police have been deployed by the force headquarters here in Abuja, 20-something deputy commissioners of police, 2 assistant inspector generals of police. Why doesn't that reassure me that the elections will be safe?
Yeah, very, very important questions, and very, very, very important question. I will begin with INEC. For INEC, I think that this is a must-win. This is a must-win. Coming out of an election, a general election that was very hotly contested, that got to the Supreme Court, that still has a lot of people aggrieved, I think this is a time to really build the confidence of Nigerians. And how will they do it? First off, there were 2 things that stood out during the presidential elections. One was in terms of deployment of materials. Second was in terms of the failure of technology, you know. And then maybe third is a partisanship of INEC in terms of the and all of that. I mean, thankfully they took actions. They took actions on that. For in terms of deployment, we have to understand the specific terrains. I'm now going back to the T that I would have gone to. Specific terrains. For Bayelsa, for example, you can access many local governments, about 5 local governments, only through water. And you know, it's a very, very difficult terrain. So INEC is not just about reassuring people. We have been reassured over and over again. But you know, when you keep repeating same thing over again, I mean, Nigerians get very discouraged, you know. So really, I think that we need to see how they've prepared for the deployment, prepared for in the deployment, even in terms of deploying security across board. Security agencies too, it's very important. I do not really think that it is a matter of deploying a lot of commissioners to a particular state per se. I think it's the will to act. So if you deploy commissioners to a particular state and all of them are partisan, all of them can't be bought over, it doesn't really make sense. So really, it is deploying them and then holding them to task to say, I want a free, fair and fair, credible election. And it is not like they've not done it before, because in Anambra election, we all speculated lots of violence. But I mean, it was very, very peaceful. So we want to see a repetition of that, because this, for me, like I said, it's a test for INEC. And my greatest fear, really, is that if this, that's why I say it's an early referendum. If this also goes the way of the presidential elections, with several controversies, it will dampen the spirit of Nigerians.
Yeah, they just got the 18 billion naira to finance this election.
Yes.
Do you think that is also another recipe that will guarantee, for instance, the deployment that we're talking about, also the logistics, the other logistics around the elections, plus IREF? Again, I mean, we've been here before. I mean, the Labour Party and the PDP don't want to hear IREF because it is part of their case against the presidential election. But INEC, again, has restated its commitment to ensure that it comes to play, and it also adds value to the transparency of the entire process. Are you reassured with everything that you've seen so far regarding Saturday's election?
Well, the thing is, as an election observer, I mean, I have no other option than to believe INEC for the good. But I sincerely also still have my doubts. I really want them to deliver, especially because, I mean, this is just about 5.4 million voters that we have. In total of all of the three states. Bayelsa is just a little about 1.5 million. So if they don't deliver on this, it will really mean that it will question a lot of the capability of INEC. And so far they've not come out to complain, that they've run short of anything. So it means that they've been well served, and they should also in turn well serve Nigeria.
You talked about in your opening remarks, you talked about this election being a referendum on maybe the person of the president. We just got news that he leaves for Saudi Arabia later today. Do you think the president has spoken enough about the need for the major players in this state, to respect the rule of law, to give peace a chance and act within, act with decorum and all of that? I mean, he could play that role regardless of the fact that he belongs to a particular party. He does appear to have distanced himself in the public space, despite the kind of tension that this election seemed to be generating. What would be the best posture of the president? Is it just to travel out of the country and pretend like I'm not there, I'm away, whatever happens, happens? Or there's a role he could play to call some of these heavyweights to order?
Yeah, simply non-partisanship. There have been statements from the presidency that indicates that the president will be non-partisan. I expect it to be so. I also expect it to be more forceful than it is now, especially for a president that that has gone to the global space to be that face of democracy, looking at the West African African sub-region, where he says, oh, there will be no more coups. So if you are the face of democracy, and then whether you like it or not, it's still debatable, but election is one of the very first step towards a very credible democracy. So I am thinking that, like I said, this is the very first election that he will be supervising. And then after the election, on the day of the election, it will be 120 days in office. And whether we like it or not, having a free and fair election adds to his achievements, and being non-partisan in that election will also begin to bring on hope in Nigeria that the 2027 election that he will be recontesting, perhaps, will perhaps give some of the candidates that would contest with him to say, okay, maybe the election management bodies will be non-partisan. Let's not also forget one of the issues that we've had, that I think that the presidency must necessarily act on is the recently nominated Rex that are now partisan that they have. So strong statements that will say, no, I am for all Nigerians, election is over, Supreme Court judgment is also still over, so please play by the rules. peace and progress is what we want in Nigeria. That's the posture I want. Even if he is out of the country, let him release strong statements in that regard, especially like a day to the election to ensure that Nigerians, I am non-partisan in that regard.
I don't know how much realistically you can expect a politician to be non-partisan, but you can expect him to do the right thing, because if you ask the president, he would love for APC to win all the elections on Saturday. But then again, the question is, how will these parties win the elections, regardless of whose ox is God? But then again, we take you to Imo now, just to give you a sense of how things are shaping up, especially as we consider some of the tensions that are in there. We start, first of all, with Bayelsa, and then we further the conversation here in the studio. Okay, I do believe that we have Friday Ebimobowe Peter standing by, though we're going to get a piece of reporting there. But Friday, good morning. Thank you very much for joining us on Daybreak. Give me a sense of what Yenagoa is like this morning, and what the people are saying is just barely 2 days before the elections.
Good morning. Yenagoa here. I think people are ready for the election, and yesterday, the commissioner, the INEC commissioner, Mrs. May, said that the sensitive materials will arrive to CBN today, this morning, and any moment from now, I think I will be there. See how things are going.
Right. So yesterday, the major players in the elections signed the peace accord, and we also got the sense that all is not well politically speaking. I mean, those volatile areas in the Nembe area, for instance, still pose some significant threat. What is your reading of the situation, especially regarding the political rhetoric in Bayelsa today? What do the people think about the commitment of their political elites to a peaceful election?
There is still some violent threat too, but the security agency have already assured, and even the INEC have assured the people that they will see the election will be peaceful. And we have been hearing some different reports from like that of Nembe Basambu. That, in fact, there is still security threat.
Right.
So what's the nature of the deployment of security personnel? Have they started? Is there a sense of additional deployments in the states, or they are waiting to the 11th hour before the D-Day of the elections to deploy? Can you give me a sense of what the deployments are on the streets, at least to guarantee a sense of security?
Yeah, about the security aspect, what the commander for nigerianews said, he said 2 days to the election, they will deploy security personnel, most especially to the riverine areas, and even within the Yenagoa metropolitan, they will deploy. And now from 10 o'clock, I will go to the youth officers. I think there is even the police also, they are about to.
Okay.
Right. Okay.
Thank you very much, Friday. We will circle back to you as we build up to the elections for more updates.
Okay.
Thank you.
Safe to say that nothing has significantly changed yet. Yeah.
But we've listened to the police talk about 130,000 policemen to be deployed in these 3 states, and we have had this kind of situation before. Given the heightened tension, what do you think this militarization of our election process would do? Does it help to guarantee safety for the ordinary Nigerians, or it just basically even gets them disinterested in the process? Because, I mean, election is not war. Why do we have that heavy deployment, just to get people to exercise their civic right?
Yeah, so I have a slightly different opinion from that. Election is not war in a peaceful place, but election is war already in a war-ridden area. So really, no matter how you think of it, the presence of security officials would encourage many other people to go out and vote, because really they understand the fact that if the security officials do not carry the guns, there are possible persons that will carry the gun, really. And of course, you want people you can report, people you can hold accountable to carry the guns, really. So I think that more deployment is good, but it is also about accountability. Are the security agencies keeping to the rules in terms of, because we have different strategies. We have those at the polling close to the polling booths that
they're not arm-bearing.
They're not arm-bearing. We have some that are just basically for detective purposes, and then others that are roving around perhaps with guns for the troublemakers. So it's just about accountability. So we don't expect that the police and security officials will involve themselves in human rights abuses. Now that's where the fundamental challenge comes, and of course, like you said, and rightly said, election in the real sense, in an ideal sense, is not war. So we don't expect that you create that level, because you are deployed to a state, you begin to create that level of war-like situation in terms of, indiscriminately, just brandishing the guns and just scaring people. I mean, we don't expect that. We think that, like the Inspector General of Police rightly said on national television, they've been trained, and we think that they should understand the rules of the game.
Yeah, and in talking about the forthcoming election, right? According to data available after the 2023 general elections, where you had the presidential election and some federal elections in some of these states, right? Bayelsa State, it has gone down by 20 points from 36.4% to just 16.4% as far as voter turnout is concerned. In Kogi State, it has dropped by 9% from 36.6% to 24.6%. So it's safe to say that while already they have some of the lowest, voters in those states, people also don't show up on the big day where every Nigerian is voting. What is your sense of whether this election on Saturday has the right incentives for people in those areas, or for voters in those areas who are in Abuja, who are in Lagos, to go back home and want to vote? What is your sense of what the turnout may look like based on what's going on?
So for voter turnout, I mean, different things could influence voter turnout. For the last elections, people have said we shouldn't just take the blanket, just the blanket view that voter turnout was low based off of what we saw. It could also be that these are the real figures based off of the deployment of technology that we have. That is one point. And secondly, it is also the character of the candidates that are at play. People are more likely to go out to vote in a process where they feel more affiliated with the candidate. They can feel the pulse of the candidate and all of that. People are likely, to go out to vote. So if you see elections in those states where there is a more turnout of voters, it would mean that people are more interested in the candidates that are put out to vote. I mean, of course, that will now go back to the intra-party politics and whether or not their preferred candidates came out to vote, because sometimes people say non-participation is also a form of participation, really, because you are showing your dissent against a system. That is also one. The third one is also the geography. Like for Bayelsa specifically, when people talk about the last election and how voter turnout was low, I did a piece that looked at climate change and flooding and then the elections. Did we go back to interrogate how many persons? Bayelsa was one of the most affected states by flood. Did we go back to interrogate how many voters' cards were lost because of the flood, and have those voters' cards been reprinted? We've not gone back to interrogate these things. In Imo State, we've had situations where there have been different attacks, burning of houses and all of that. Have we gone back to look at how many voters' cards have been lost? So just beyond saying people have lost interest, it could just be that these guys have disadvantaged and did not even have the facility to go and vote. Right. So really different issues, really.
Interesting perspectives there. Data-driven perspectives to the issues of the off-cycle election. We now have Ajibade Praise standing by in Imo State. Good morning, Ajibade.
Good morning.
Thank you. Give us a sense of what's happening in Imo this morning. Yes. Can you hear me? All right.
Yes, I can hear you loud and clear.
Thank you very much. I'd like to get a sense of how Imo, is going about its business this morning, especially considering the position that has been taken by Labour, to prevent, to completely blacklist that state from all forms of air services into and out of Imo State, considering that logistic deployment will be happening last minute, as well as some of the personnel that will be conducting this election will be coming into town any moment from now. What's the situation like? Can you gauge the apprehension of the people ahead of this Saturday's election?
Yes, a lot is happening in Imo State as we speak right now. Right now, I'm in front of the central bank. It is expected that election material will be distributed this morning, and a lot of stakeholders are stepping in one after the other, coming into the central bank to actually inspect some of these materials that are going to be distributed to various local governments where the election is going to be taking place in the state. But you can't rule out the fact that there are apprehensions and fears, in the state. There's serious tension in the state concerning this election. The election is bringing its own tension. NLC activities in the state is also bringing its own tension. So it's a whole lot of tension in the state as we speak right now. Security agencies are trying to do their best to see how they can contain the situation. But I tell you, Imo State is tense right now as we speak.
Right.
Imo State is tense.
Ajibade, what can you tell us about the political rhetoric there in Imo State? It's one of those states that we didn't get the symbolic signing of the peace accord. But what are the political actors saying ahead of this election, especially to their supporters, on the tension in Imo?
Yeah, you will recall that a few days ago, during the special stakeholders meeting, there was some rancor in the hall there when INEC asked the press to step aside, and some political parties, who were present tell us, no, this is not right. Why are you asking the press to step aside when they are also critical stakeholders in this whole process? That they're asking the press to step aside shows that there is something you're actually hiding. That if there's nothing you want to hide, if the process is transparent, you shouldn't be afraid that the press are around. So why should you ask the press to go out of the hall or stop recording? And this thing brought a whole lot of rancor, a whole lot of squabbles, agreement claims and counter claims on that very day. Though it later, subsided, and they went ahead with the stakeholder stakeholders meeting. But then some critical questions were asked by some of the candidates, particularly the candidate of the PDP. The candidate of the PDP was asking how ready and how free and fair is INEC to conduct this election, owing to the fact that they've called severally that the resident electoral commissioner, Professor Sylvia Agu, will be removed. That they no longer trust her leadership of INEC in the state, and they are afraid that the election might not be free and fair under her. And this is as a result of what played out in the last election, where a lot of discrepancies occurred in most of the results from various polling units and what to do. And they felt they don't want that to repeat itself, and the only way they can get that done is to have her removed. But then INEC on the other side are saying these claims are not proven yet. They've not seen a reason why they should remove her. And These are the issues. Opposition parties are feeling INEC is colluding with the ruling party to see how they can perpetrate some illegality in this election. Those are claims anyway. Those are claims and allegations anyway. It's not been proven yet. But those are the fears some of the opposition parties are expressing in this whole process.
And what about security? I mean, 15 commissioners of police, over 20-something deputy commissioners of police, and 2 assistant inspector generals of police have been deployed to Imo. Give me a sense of what that has already done to the setup so far in Imo State ahead of Saturday's polls.
Yes, security situation, I would say, is calm, and I would say the security agencies are on top of their game, and I wanna give them some credit. At least you can see them evidently they are around and they are doing their job. Frank Mba, as the DIG, Frank Mba is the one in charge of the entire process, and he has said he will be interacting with journalists as well as some stakeholders too later today to actually ensure that everybody, works in synergy to provide a safe atmosphere for this electioneering process. I also understand that some of the deployment made by the IGP in terms of vehicle, in terms of some security apparatus to be used for this election has also arrived the state. And very soon there will be inspection on that as well. And I hope to be updating you on that.
Okay. Thank you very much, Ajibade Praise, for the reporting, and we hope to get more updates as some of these situations continue to develop. Thank you very much for the update.
All right. And I also hope you stay safe.
Yeah.
And
it's at the CBN, so I think he's fairly safe at the moment.
All right.
Right.
I hope. Thank you very much, Ajibade. We will cycle back to you, the need be, to get more updates from Imo. You're listening to Ajibade. They're bringing us to speed with what had happened. What do you think the mindset of the average Imo person would be at this time, even though we have seen efforts from the center to try and make that process credible by deploying more security agency and very senior security personnel for that matter? If one was a voter, if you were a voter in Imo State, is this sufficient guarantees or reassurance by the state, that you can go out safely and peacefully discharge your civic duty and return home? Is it enough?
Well, I think considerably it helps. It helps considerably. Very unfortunately, we didn't have the peace accord in Imo. I was thinking, no matter how symbolic that is, it has some kind of value to the process. Candidates saying whether or not they mean it or not, saying we agree to a peace process and all of that. So I think it considerably it helps. It helps. But for Imo, it is also a very a very special case, especially for the Southeast. The Southeast has been a place where historically they've been very, very suspicious of security agencies. And you've had clamors where you say, oh, all of the killings that have been happening in that place are done by security agencies, not really us, and they just is a blackmail towards separate agitations and all of that. So there are these concerns about the military forces, security agencies, and all of that. So I expect that for Imo, I would want the security agencies to be very, very careful and be very, 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 very professional, very, very professional, especially because whatever you do in Imo can be rallied around after the election to say, look at how they treated us just because it is Imo. Why are they even sending this number of commissioners because it is now Imo? So it is a situation where we need to be very, very, very careful. I think it's very good. Evidently, they have to be there to maintain law and order, for people to be safe, for properties not to be destroyed and all of that, but they have to be very, very professional.
Right. Staying with Imo, elections were not conducted in 38 polling units out of the 4,758 polling units over zero registration. It speaks to the challenges that we're talking about a little earlier, where ahead of the 2023 general elections, we're seeing several of these developments in the Southeast, for instance, where whether it's unknown gunmen or IPOB elements disrupting INEC activities, attacking communities who are trying to get their PVCs, who are trying to register to vote. What about those threats? Do you think that the presence of the security is enough to deter them from being the disruptors that they have been in that area for quite some time?
I think it helps, but above all, I think the dynamics of local politics is what comes to play. We saw how during the presidential election, despite how we thought that there were lots of problems, we saw these people coming together to vote their own, really, and not even letting any other political party even have 25%. So it means they understand that, when it comes to local politics, whatever we do, perhaps we'll be hurting ourselves. So I still see that there might be some remarkable difference, especially because across the states, we are conducting these elections not along with any national elections. not along with any state assembly elections. It is just
it's a standalone
one constituency
election, right,
conducting elections. So I believe that this will be remarkably different. This will be remarkably different.
Right. So you talked about a number of things. We had to interject on a number of time to stop you from talking about all of the things you think would be a factor in this election. But I'm a bit curious that it does appear that in these three states particularly, the consideration largely is not a function of the state of the economy. You know, the economic indices are not even on the table. It's about ethnic identity and all of that. Why is this so difficult to be able to sit there and say, oh, because of what Nigerians are going through, we think this will be a referendum on how the economy has performed and all of that. Why is the economic indices not on the table in this election in these three states?
Yeah, I must admit it's quite a very sad one, quite sad one. Starting off with Bayelsa, looking at the multidimensional figures that we had last year. Bayelsa is the second poorest state in the country. Till we have till we have another figures that might disprove that. But a lot of the discussions do not center on that and the absence of issue-based politics. And that goes to to talk about how enlightened and how invested the electorates are. Because if you tell me about ethnicity in a place where we have lots of very educated and enlightened people, they will say, no, that's not what I want to hear. I mean, I want to hear about development. I want to hear about your deal with the issues of climate change. I want to hear about how you would bring perhaps make Imo a safe haven outside of the southeast states. Let's not forget that despite how conflict-ridden the northwest is, we still have states like Jigawa that is also that's also put up there in the northwest. We still have Kano that's a bit of that has some bit of calm. Yes. So I'm thinking that those should have been the discourse, but it's about personality attack, lots of information disorder, lots of security issues and I think it's really, really sad. It's really, really sad to say the least.
I mean, you look at the high stakes, especially in Nigeria, right? Elections are a high stakes, zero-sum game where winner takes all. And for me to win, you have to lose, whatever it takes. That is unfortunately what we have seen over the years. But give me a sense of the symbolic and now apparently what has become a political tradition now, the peace accord signing. And, we're going back to Bayelsa where the running mate of Timipre Silva has been trending for the wrong reasons. Those inciting messages, calling for violence, threatening political oppositions. And, just as Sunday alluded to a little earlier, immediately after signing it, they were all smiles while they were signing it. But, after that, the gloves came off and, they were back to boxing each other with words. Tell me why that usually doesn't count for people when they head to the polls and realize that this person is not necessarily adding value to the political discourse with what they're saying and how these communities are interpreting some of these messages, especially for people from outside looking in. They would say, listen, Niger Deltans are more or less one people, whether it's Ijo or other tribes are within those communities.
Well, I really think that those that think that we do not they undermine the horizontal inequality in that particular place, in that particular region. I will begin with the Peace Commission. So if you look at the Peace Commission, you would realize that it is more or less very, very ceremonial, and being a conflict analyst myself, I've realized that over the years, the way people think is that they look at the reward and then the punishment. Once they see that the actions that they take do not have a punishment or the reward for that action is far above the punishment, they would go ahead and then do it. So really, we need beyond just the Peace Commission, we need the security agencies to prosecute high-profile persons for election-related malpractices, I mean, we saw that for example, just to take us digress a little, the Adamawa rec did not appear in court, and you're wondering what is happening in this country. So I think it's very important. Now, going back to the issue, absence of issue-based politicking, and then how the Niger Deltas and one and all of that. It is. I think it's more or less like an ideal than what it is in the reality. The Niger Delta is not a monolithic whole. It is made of the Ijos, the Urobos, the Shekiris, and different persons. And even in Bayelsa, you have the Nimbe people that will say, oh, we are not Ijos, or we are just partly Ijos. The Ogbias that will say, oh, we don't speak the exact same Ijo language. And of course, during the last elections, 2019, you hear the rhetorics, Ko Ijo and non-Ko Ijo come into play. So I really think that what you see in Nigeria, once you go back to the states, you see it, you still see same thing. And I tell people, if today you have a Niger Delta Republic, what you will still have in Nigeria will still happen, because you still have a smaller groups that will be competing for different interests. Let's not forget, look at what happened in Rivers State, for example. Right. Between Wike and then of course the incumbent governor. Just within 24 hours, it was brought to an ethnic dimension to say, oh, the Wike is now against the Ijaw people and all of that. So exactly. So the point I'm trying to make is that these things are also ever present in the subnational politics, and it's a big mistake to think that, oh, they are just one common people without looking at the horizontal inequalities in that space.
But what about INEC's position? We saw one of the national commissioners there, Mrs. May, talk about INEC's mechanism for addressing some of these violent developments on election day, which is to say that they simply and effectively just cancel the polling units. And, we're making a point that if you're someone who is mischievous, the best way to undermine your political opponent will be to take those violent attacks to his stronghold, so that those polling units get cancelled. Do you think there is a need for us to find a workaround in terms of addressing that? Because cancellation of votes does not add value to democracy, isn't it? Because we're trying to get as many votes as we can so that it will reflect the will of the people.
So it's very unfortunate. It is not like we don't have an history to this thing. It just happened in the last presidential elections where people were flogged in Lagos in places that they felt that these persons would vote a particular political party. So voter suppression is real, and the use of violence to suppress vote is real, and it's happening. So I think that is actually not enough. The point I'm trying to make is that we have adequate intelligence agencies in this country, and every political thug has a paymaster. Why don't you go and arrest them? Why do you wait for people to risk their lives, come out and then vote, and then you cancel the vote? So first off, you have actually disincentivized the voter. So he will think that at the next round or the next election, why should I even go and vote? I don't even know the probability of my vote getting to count. I know, of course, going to stand in that line for hours to vote don't take it for granted. It's a lot of social responsibility, really, to stand on that line, because you could be doing something else with that time, really. So I think it's important that INEC needs to look at an holistic approach, and I think that this quick fix approach to things is not something that is working. The actors. Don't shy away from going to arrest them and putting them to account. Nigeria is not a lawless country, really. So if you get the actors, get them arrested. Let them not also forget. By now, I actually even thought that one of the ways that they would incentivize people to come out to vote, we were telling us that, oh, we arrested several persons. The police have told us that they made several arrests in the past elections. But how is the prosecution case? How many of them have been prosecuted as at now? And this is the reason why you shouldn't, you shouldn't be involved in electoral violence. So, for example, 500 persons are now in prison, and look at their record. You can go and cross-check. They are in prison serving 10 years term, 5 years term. So please don't go out and then vote. I was thinking those kind of things that will incentivize people to, to come out to vote. But mere rhetorics like cancelling of vote, I think it will also make these smart politicians. Smart politicians want to suppress vote in the stronghold of others. And just to add, now, if you look at information disorder, So while we are here, we might not really understand the local politics in many places. What these politicians also do is to shout more, is to shout more, to say the Nembe, the Brass is where the violence is taking place, so that they will influence the deployment of security, particularly to those kind of places, right? And then, well, then perhaps the other political party might also say, oh, it is Southern Ijaw and Yenagua is where violence is taking place, so that they will influence the deployment of security to that particular place. And they do their thing in their own places where the security is a bit now open. So the security agencies must have to, be very smart to read the minds of these politicians.
All right. Just a quick cycle back to one of the questions Abdul talked about, which was on the peace agreement being largely symbolic. Have we come to a point where we now begin to think about how to tinker with the whole idea of the peace accord to find a space for it in the constitution, so that it become even a basis for prosecution? It will not just be a peace. I remember those days getting into the institution after the volatile period of student union. We were meant to sign a good behavior bond, and you have to take that to the court and have it. And that bond
is binding.
And have it stamped, and you would not know how much you were committing yourself to a process until there is a violence, and that they could recall that good behavior, and it become a basis for restitution. Should we begin to find, in law, find a place in law, in our laws, where we concretize some of these arrangements, such that the moment you go against the spirits and letters of that commitment, it becomes the basis to even take you to court almost immediately, have a speedy trial, and throw you behind bars? What do you make of that?
Quite interesting. I think it's actually a very good idea, but I would want to ask a rhetoric question, really, and the question will be that, don't we have enough laws already? The Electoral Act also spells out all of the possible offenses. So really, I would think that the laws are not actually the problem. It is the enforcement that is the problem. Fortunately, we are still battling with, passing the Electoral Offences Commission, into law and establishing that. So the problem is really about enforcement, and I think that's where the problem lies.
Right. We've been inundated talking about security, political tensions, that we haven't talked about what, for me, I consider the elephant in the conversation, and that is the monetization of the process. What is your 2 cents on that? Because we know for sure, as much as they're going to deploy those, evil tactics of, attacks through, thugs and things like that, they will still use the carrot in this instance, which is to buy votes on election day. What are your 2 cents about these 3 states going the same route of, vote buying?
So the former Ekiti State governor used the term stomach infrastructure, but I actually think that these elections is one that will be dominated by money. It's just basically a money election. Now, why am I saying so? The economic conditions in the country, the inflation and all of that, the poverty rate and all of that will encourage many people to be involved in vote buying and vote selling and like that. And beyond that also, for me, I think it is the last election we had that naira scarcity, that whether bad or good still had some restrictions in terms of vote buying.
Incentivized it for a lot of people.
But this time it's actually a very open-ended one. So politicians will try as much as they can to buy votes with different things, and it happens in different ways. Beyond the money that is being bought, beyond the money that is being used to buy votes on election day, we've still seen quick fix situations where last-minute political appointments are made, employment opportunities are made, and all of that. Different people are giving very quick appointments and promises in terms of to buy their votes. So I think it will really be a money elections, and that will also, just to zero in, I have not seen statements by the EFCC this time and ICPC this time on how much they are going to get involved in ensuring that our election is not, is not basically a mere commodity for sale.
All right. Saturday, all eyes will be on these 3 states, and I do hope that we don't get disappointed in terms of what was promised and what will be delivered at the end of the day. I suppose it's going to be, the next couple of days is going to be as busy as you can imagine for you and as for us also in the media industry. But we're going to have to leave it here for now, Mr. Angalapu. Thank you very much as always for informed and expert analysis on this conversation. And we hope to, have, you join us also over the weekend as we continue our coverage of these developments. Thank you very much for stopping by.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.